In our role, from the legislature standpoint, we are designed to appraise and assess and collect property taxes for budgetary purposes to help the schools in their funding. The jurisdictional rule on school districts is they must grant, it's what we call a mandatory exemption. It's provided by property tax code that the school district grant $35,000 exemption before the tax rate is applied to the value. So for example, if you have a $100,000 house that's been appraised by my office, and then you have a homestead exemption on it, we're automatically going to deduct $35,000 from that value before the tax rate for that particular school district is applied. So you would pay taxes on the difference being $65,000. Eligible people for the homestead exemption, the qualifications are it has to be your primary place of residence in where you live and occupy on a continual basis. Should it be agreeable with your mailing address and or the physical address on your Texas state issued driver's license. If those qualifications are met and you're there and you occupy that residence as of January 1 of any year, then you would qualify for that general homestead exemption. It deducts value against the appraised value, and when that happens, the number that we come up with is called assessed value, because that's the value that we actually assess the tax on. The state of Texas provides in the exemptions for homeowners that are over 65 or disabled on their residential homestead. They can qualify on their birth date or on the date that they become disabled according to paperwork either from their doctor, the Social Security people, Veterans Administration. Then they qualify for that additional exemption. It's called a senior citizen discount, is common language. So there's an additional exempted amount that comes off of that before the tax rate is applied. But then the most important thing is the year that that event takes place, it creates the frozen ceiling. If an individual is qualified for the over 65 or disability along with their homestead, then by virtue of that qualification on that homestead and the frozen part of that, then they are not affected by things like property value rising. They're not affected by things like school districts passing bond elections, or even if the case was, say, the bond election was not a bond election, it was just a rise in tax rate by the school jurisdiction. Any of those events do not affect that frozen ceiling unless that taxpayer has physically altered the value of the property themselves by making additions or adding a parcel of land or something like that to a homestead account. It could possibly be a clerical error on our part. If that's the case, it's very fixable. We can revert that, get rid of that error, and then that situation clarifies itself. The second thing is people will confuse their tax bill. In most all cases, a taxpayer has several entities that are collecting, that are charging taxes or assessing taxes against the value of their property. They may have a school district. We know they have a county rate because if they're in Tom Green County, they have county taxes. They may have a water district conservation that's assessing a tax rate as well. If their value does rise in any given year, or if the tax rates for some of those other jurisdictions that do not provide by law the frozen ceiling and are not required to provide for the frozen ceiling, then they will see an increase in their overall tax bill, but it will not be to the school district itself. It will most likely be something along the lines of the county. I carried a little handheld calculator with me, and we could sit down. I have access to, I have a little, I have my phone. I can get to our records from my phone. I have a tablet. I can get to the records from my tablet. And we could sit down and we could dial up their account. We could see what their address was and say, okay, here's the proposed tax rate. This is what it's going to mean to you. We'll take your exemptions and look at your taxable value, and this is what it's going to cause your taxes to go up on an annual basis. And we can do that inside the office. We can do it at the bond hearings. Any place that I'm invited, we're capable of being able to provide dollars and cents answers for what the architects and the funding companies and stuff are providing to the jurisdiction that's considering this bond election. We can actually take their numbers, their projections, and we can turn it into what an actual tax will amount to them and how it will affect their annual tax liabilities.